Mr. Bett, do you recognize this photograph?
I do,
And how do you recognize it?
because I took that picture.
Why did you take this photograph?
Well, we needed it as evidence in case Ms. Heard tried to make allegations towards Mr. Depp. I was emphatic with him, telling him that's a serious mark and we need to photograph it.
Mr. Bett, what does this photograph show?
It depicts a swollen upper left cheekbone with redness to it.
Okay, thank you, ma'am.
Good afternoon, Mr. Bett.
Good afternoon.
Will you please state your name for the record?
Joshua Sean Bett.
Mr. Bett, what is your occupation?
I'm currently security with Johnny Depp.
And your current employer is Mr. Depp?
That's correct.
And how long have you been in private security?
Approximately just over 20 years.
I believe you testified earlier that you observed many arguments between Mr. Depp and Ms. Heard. Do you recall anything that Ms. Heard said to Mr. Depp while they were arguing?
There was an incident because, as I said, the arguing progressed over and over as the years continued. He would text me when I was working saying, you know.
Objection, Your Honor. Calls for hearsay.
All right, I'll sustain that objection if you want to.
Mr. Bett, if you could just focus on what Ms. Heard, you overheard Ms. Heard say while observing arguments between Mr. Depp and Ms. Heard.
I overheard her saying to him, he's a fat ass, fuck you, Johnny, and you too, Sean, at one time when, you know, she went to throw a water bottle or a plastic cup down the stairs and it bounced kind of in Johnny's direction, but I ended up getting him and we, you know, got out of there as soon as possible.
Mr. Bett, do you recognize this photograph?
I do,
And how do you recognize it?
because I took that picture.
Why did you take this photograph?
Well, we needed it as evidence in case Ms. Heard tried to make allegations towards Mr. Depp. I was emphatic with him, telling him that's a serious mark and we need to photograph it.
I just moved to strike for foundation.
I'll allow that answer, but thank you.
And when did you take this photograph?
It would have been around March of 2015.
Your Honor, we ask that this photograph please be published to the jury and admitted into evidence.
Any objection to 146?
No, Your Honor.
All right, 146 in evidence and be published to the jury. Thank you.
Mr. Bett, what does this photograph show?
It depicts a swollen upper left cheekbone with redness to it.
Thank you. Did you notice any other injuries on Mr. Depp?
On that specific day, no.
Later in time, did you ever notice any other injuries on Mr. Depp?
I did.
Can you please describe what you recall?
It was around December of that same year, 2015. He got into an argument with Ms. Heard and she scratched him and he had injuries.
Objection, Your Honor.
Sustain the objection, only your observation, sir, what you saw.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Bett, can you please describe the injury that you saw on Mr. Depp?
Yes, he had scratch marks around his nose area. I believe on one of the sides of his face in the cheek area and then on his forehead.
And if we could just have published to the witness plaintiff's exhibit number 65.
65.
And Mr. Bett, this is a 3-page document, so if I can have Mr. Arnold Blair please scroll down.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Do you recognize these photographs?
I do,
And how do you recognize them?
because I took them.
When did you take them?
Mid-December 15th.
And why did you take these photographs?
I took him to show proof that he once again had injuries sustained in an altercation.
Your Honor, we'll move to publish these photographs to the jury and for admittance.
All right, any objection to 65?
No, Your Honor.
All right, 65 in evidence, it can be published.
And Mr. Bett, would you please describe what we're looking at here?
The first picture, there's a laceration on the left side of his nose. It looks like the left upper cheek has a slight bruise to it. And then on his forehead, right above the ridgeline, just almost to the center, it looks like there's a red scratch mark above his left eye and to the right.
Do you see that in the same subsequent pictures in page 2?
Okay, page 2, I see a scratch mark, a vertical scratch mark adjacent to his right ear on the right side of his face.
Same question for page 3.
Page 3, there's a scratch mark on the lower right portion of his chin. There's that same scratch mark on the center left side of his nose, and you could see the frontal portion of that bruise that's on the left side under his eye.
Were you surprised to see Mr. Depp with these injuries?
Objection, leading.
All right, I sustain as to leading.
Did you ever see any similar injuries on Ms. Heard?
None.
Did you ever see any injuries on Ms. Heard?
I didn't.
Did Ms. Heard ever tell you she was being abused by Mr. Depp?
She didn't.
Did she ever ask you for help?
No.
Did you ever see any evidence that Ms. Heard was being abused by Mr. Depp?
I didn't. Once Mr. Judge and I rounded that corner and she saw both Jerry and I, she had this look of surprise on her face, and then she looked at Mr. Depp and us, and she shouted out loud, "This is the last time you do this to me." At which point Mr. Depp looked at her and said, "What the hell are you talking about?" At that point, Mr. Judge tapped Mr. Depp on the arm and told him, "Boss, let's leave." So we gathered, there was a couple of computer bags that was right on a table, and we exited the front door to penthouse number 3.
Based on your observations, did you have a clear view of Ms. Heard?
I did.
Did you have a clear view of her face?
I did.
Did you observe any injuries on Ms. Heard's face?
I didn't.
Did you see any redness,
I didn't.
swelling?
None.
Was Ms. Heard holding her face?
She wasn't.